I'm Isa. Today we're going to talk about important things in the tech industry. But before, let me tell you a little bit about my story, because as Un and Olga said, I was here last year, more precisely on the 7th of September, so a little over a year. And I was at this very stage, talking about how performance and optimizations are important in the web, because in Brazil, where I'm from, it's not everybody that can afford like a blazing fast internet like we have here in the Nordics. So it's really important to render things fast, because that could mean that you're denying access of information to someone. But it wasn't just that happened. I spent a week here in Stockholm and basically just like fell in love with the city, fell in love with the people and the community, because when you're South American, then what you hear about Europeans is that, well, those guys are like cold, they're not friendly, but you surprisingly were, and that made me feel very comfortable. But more than everything, I fell in love with this guy. You may know him as MPJ. He has a channel from Function. But I have the amazing privilege to call him my partner. And basically what happened is that 72 hours after we met, we said that we loved each other for the first time. And I asked him, like, if I move to Stockholm, will he move too? And hearing his yes was one of the best moments of my life until now. And it was really funny, because the first time that we kissed, we actually cannot remember anything. We were apparently very wasted, and it was at Festen. And we were talking to our friend Samuel. He's a photographer here in Nordic for a couple of years now. And he said, yeah, I mean, I have a picture of you guys making out, but I wasn't sure if I was supposed to like release it or publish it. And we were like, Samuel, I need this picture, honestly. And the picture is amazing. Basically, there's a lot going on in this picture, right? As you can see, we are making out here in the right-hand side, but also, something's going on here. I have no idea what the fuck was happening. And also, look at this guy. The look on his face is the reason why we have Systembolaget here in Sweden. Yeah, so a lot of things happening. So a year and 8 countries later, because when you distance relationship for a while, that means that you have to piggyback on each other's rides. We are living very happily here in Sweden. I'm learning a ton about what it's like to live in Europe and the Nordics. It's the first time that I live abroad. And we do very Swedish things. I'm getting good at this thing about being a Swede. We go to IKEA every Sunday, which I heard is basically Disneyland for Swedes. We do midsummer things. We do the whole like flower crown on our heads. It was very fun. And then you need to like drink and sing songs. And also, this is very traditional as well. It's a thing called semla, in case you don't know. So there's a lot of things that indicate that I'm a very good Swede in this picture. First of all, is how much I'm getting messy with this whole thing. And second of all, is the Bamse book right there that you can see. I got that for my housewarming present, since I can't read Swedish. Now I'm a little bit better. Still figuring things out. Wasn't able to read that thing. Wow. Right now. I actually thought he was a rat not too long ago. I was informed that he is actually a bear. Anyway, so I can say the Nordic and its community completely changed my life. And basically, I wouldn't imagine myself living in Sweden if it weren't for Nordic last year. And in this sentence, there's a very important word, which is community. And I spent a while thinking about what does that mean and what are we doing? So as a development, as a JavaScript and Nordic community, what are we doing really? We basically like to talk about tooling a lot, which is great. Like, I don't think we would be here in the state of JavaScript right now. We wouldn't have an ubiquitous ecosystem of JavaScript tooling around if we weren't so good at it, and that's why we like to speak about it. But then we don't really like to talk about real-world problems as much, which is a little bit concerning. Because, I mean, if you think about it, we are basically just problem solvers. And if we don't think about the problems too much, then what are we doing really with our time? And that got me thinking into a very specific question, which is, in 10 years from now, are we going to be proud of what we're doing? Sit tight. So I'm Isa, again. Thank you so much, Olga and Noon, for the introduction. I do all these things. I do code in Isabella, which is a really good company here in Stockholm. I'm also a Mozilla Tech speaker. And one thing that I found out about myself very recently is that I'm also the lost twin of the Imposter Brew guy, which is very fun. Didn't know that. This is actually a picture from the thumbnail of this dev interview with Mayuko. You guys should definitely watch. It's really fun. But going back to the question, so why is it that we prefer to talk about tooling so much rather than actual problems? So, well, the first of all is that it's pretty cool, like, right? We really like to code frameworks, and it feels it is very satisfying to get this very complex technical problem, figure it out, put it in a thing that is easy and free for everybody to use. Like, open source is amazing. So I don't deny that it's really, really cool. It's awesome. Also, the learning curve is very satisfying, because when you know nothing about a subject and you give it time and effort enough that you get good at it, it feels really good to look back and see how much you've progressed. So I also understand that. And it's also easily controllable. Maybe easy is not the word here, but it's way easier for you to like identify that you have a bug somewhere, and then you crack your head around it and eventually you figure it out, rather than actually like solving someone's life crisis or solving a very important issue such as famine or diseases. So it is pretty it's easier than that, which is fine. Like, this list is amazing, but there is a very important word that's missing here in this list, which is accountability. So we never talk about how responsible we are for the things that we ship or the things that we put in production, right? Which is a little bit concerning. We are responsible for all the dark UX patterns. We are responsible when we make our users buy things that they can't afford. We are responsible when we are part of something that's gonna, well, exploit or trick our users. So yes, we are responsible. And we need to figure things out, because I think developers are in such a high position of power nowadays. So there's such high demand for developers everywhere, and we can use that to leverage companies to suit our values, or to keep track on companies actually fulfilling the mission. So one really good example of this that I found was that last year, a bunch of employees at Microsoft just got together to protest against a bill by the ICE in the USA, which is the immigration department there. And they had this nearly $20 billion contract with Microsoft that would allow them to get data on several kinds of people that Microsoft withheld. And ultimately, that was going to cause a bunch of families to be torn apart, and especially kids would be separated from their parents. And all the employees at Microsoft just got together to protest against that, and that resulted in Microsoft dropping the contract. And even resulted in the president of Microsoft making this press release saying that, you know what, this country needs to get immigration right. So we do have the power to change things and to keep tabs on our employers, keep tabs on the whole digital ecosystem that we have nowadays. And more than that, like, I truly believe that we are able to change the course of history, and we are able to change facts, and we build things that are powerful enough that they allow things to happen that wouldn't be able to happen like 20 years ago when we didn't have the web. Things like messaging apps that have been bringing people together for the past years, and shortening distance, and like online platforms for knowledge sharing that has been democratizing access to information and education to so many people out there that actually need this thing. So we can change things. We do have the power. And that, I try to generalize this a little bit, and how I see software nowadays, I think it truly is a tool to reduce human suffering. And we need to start thinking about software as such. It's not just the cool stack that we're figuring out, it's not just the cool things that we develop, it's not just the cool add-ons that we develop for a browser, it's this. It's not more than this. So we need to shift from a culture that is solution-driven, which is most times what we're doing right now is like, okay, we have this problem, but what the fuck? I want to talk about the stack. What are we going to use? What framework? Is it going to be React? Is it going to be Angular? And honestly, that's really consistent because we need to talk about these things, especially when we have a team revolving around it. But we also need to have in mind the value of the products that we ship to production. We need to talk about the value of the software that we implement and who is this helping? What am I putting out in the world? What does this add to the table? And this is really important to just have a notion of, have like a reality check of like, okay, this is what we develop. This is why we're here. Okay, so how do we get there? I truly believe that there's very simple steps, not simple steps, but questions that you have to keep asking yourself. So the first of them is, who are we working for? Not just the company, but like, what are we really doing here? And it's really different for you to think about, okay, I'm not working for my employer, I'm working for my user. And that changes everything. Because when you start thinking that the things that you're developing for are ultimately going to a person. I was here for Nordic Design for a little bit yesterday, and there was a talk from a guy named Jack that had a very deep voice. It was very impressive. And he talked about how data points are actually people. And this is also something that we really do need to consider. Like everyone that uses, everybody in our analytics, everybody that is actually using our tools, they are people with needs, and your software might be saving their lives or might be helping them to do something. So keep them in mind more than the people who are actually paying your salary. It's very important. Also, if you're talking about the future, choose your next job wisely, and that's very important because we work with software, and that means that we spend like 8 hours of our day doing something. And if you're not donating, but if you're selling those 8 hours to a company that is doing a lot of dark UX patterns, that is doing basically horrible malpractices against our users, then this is not a very good use of our time, right? Or our talent. Because as software engineers, doing code is a very big talent, actually. And please don't put that to waste. So be very mindful of the employer that you're going to choose. Make sure that you're going to talk to people that used to work there or that work there currently, and do research, read comments online, and of course, like during the interviews, make sure to ask the important questions. Make sure to ask the hard questions. Make sure to ask how diverse they are, how the workforce is treated, what are their missions, what are their values. And this is very important. It's not just, okay, but what stack do you use? It's also, what are you developing and who are you developing for? Finally, do consider, like, of course I'm not trying to educate everyone to be like volunteer or trying to save the world right now, but if you can, like, do consider donating time for causes that you believe in. And I must say, like, working as a volunteer on open source or volunteering projects is a very good practice for all the tooling things that you learned at conferences and all the things that you're trying to learn about the next framework. So it is a very, very cool opportunity for you to practice that and also help millions of people out there. And I selected a few of these projects nowadays that I think they're very cool, that you can also support or help out. So the first one is a thing called, God, I always forget, Too Good To Go. It's really cool because they have a mission of, they map every single food or ingredient that is about to expire. And in most supermarkets in like developed countries, you basically just throw them away in the trash because it's not consumable or not sellable anymore. But there's so many people that could be benefiting of buying that for like a reduced price. So it's really good because they just map out all these ingredients and they are able to sell them for really lower prices, and that has been able to put food in so many families' tables for more than a year now. So that is a very interesting project that you guys can consider. Also, talking about disabilities, there's this project called Be My Eyes. So basically what this does is that there's an app for blind and visually impaired people, and sometimes they have a task that they need to do or something that they need to see, and they can't do that very well. So that app connects someone that doesn't have their vision 100% with a person that has normal sight. And that person can help describe what that person is seeing. So it's really, really good to empower visually impaired. be sure to check it out. Even if you don't have time or can support them, just make sure to check out the project because it's really interesting. Another one that actually surprised me was the Red Cross actually has a repo with this project that's called the CBS. So basically what this does is that you as a person can help relate or report things that have been happening that are very bad, such as disease outbreaks or famine. And you can report that so that the Red Cross themselves or other volunteers can go there and take action and actually help improve the situation. So it's really, really cool. And their repo is open source, obviously. You can just make sure to contribute or just leave your stars. I don't know. There's definitely a lot of ways that you can help them in fulfilling this mission. And lastly, I was speaking at JSConf Budapest last week or the week before, and there was a really interesting talk by a guy named Taylor Fairbank, and he works as this project called the Distribute Aid. And it was so interesting. His talk was about how performance is actually an issue when you're talking about creating software for refugee camps and these insane situations that we don't really go through in our day-to-day as a developer. And the project is insanely cool. So basically what they do is that they gather around people that are willing to donate food or other resources to refugee camps, and they find ways to make them share the shipping so that they don't have to pay as much to donate things. And they map this out and get everybody to just collaborate and make sure that the cost for donating things is lower for these refugee camps. So make sure to check it out. They have a bunch of volunteer developers on board, and you could also be one of them. So it's really, really cool projects, and this is just a few ones to outline what I'm talking about. I'm sure that if you guys search for a little bit, you can definitely find one that speaks to you. But another very important thing is that what I'm trying to say here is that it takes a value-driven community to build valuable software. And what I talk about value-driven community is that we need to have our hearts in the right place. We're not, obviously, the industry has a lot of opportunities and you can definitely get a comfortable life, but let's not forget where we came from. So we need to get our sanity check in place and constantly ask ourselves, what are we developing or what are we doing with our time? And make sure that you're where you're supposed to be and you're developing for the people that you're supposed to be developing. And a lot of people ask me, okay, but what's the future of JS? And I joined all these panels all the time, and everybody's just so eager to know what they have to learn next. And when I was doing this talk, I realized that, you know what, it doesn't matter, because the future of JS is always going to come second to the future of the community. Because ultimately, we here in this room, we are the people that are making things happen. And we are the people that are making JavaScript happen. We are the people into C39. So if we don't have our values in place, then JavaScript doesn't really matter, does it? So the future of JavaScript is always going to come second to the future of the community. Lastly, we can't talk about community if we don't talk about the people who make this happen every year. And this is an outdated picture from last year. But I just want to give a shout out to these amazing heroes, volunteers, and organizers that make this happen every year. So let's give it up for them. You guys are freaking awesome. And I want to thank you so much for having me for the second year around to tell my story and to talk a little bit about the important things. And thank you guys so much for listening in. Tack så mycket. If you have any questions or you'd like to discuss more about this subject, I would love to hear you out. I'll be at the conference in the live stream. We're streaming on the studio right there, me, MPJ, and David. So make sure to catch me up there or on Twitter. I'll be available. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.